The memorial service seemed to have brought a sense of calm to the store. Employees were more relaxed, and the eerie feeling that had plagued Jake was gone. The following weeks passed without incident, and life at Walmart returned to its usual humdrum routine. However, Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. He often found himself glancing over his shoulder, half expecting to see the ghostly figure again. But as time passed and nothing happened, he began to convince himself that the worst was over. One night, as Jake was closing up the store, he heard a soft knocking sound coming from one of the storage rooms. He paused, his heart racing, but then shook his head. It was probably just a loose shelf or a stray animal. He decided to ignore it and continued his rounds. But the knocking persisted. It grew louder and more insistent, echoing through the empty aisles. Jake finally decided to investigate. He made his way to the storage room, his flashlight casting long, eerie shadows on the walls. Jake opened the door to the storage room and shined his flashlight inside. The room was filled with boxes and crates, but nothing seemed out of place. He stepped inside, his flashlight beam sweeping across the shelves. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind him. Jake spun around, but there was no one there. His heart pounded in his chest as he tried to open the door, but it was stuck. Panic began to set in as he realized he was trapped. The knocking sound started again, this time coming from the other side of the room. Jake turned, his flashlight shaking in his hand. He could see a dark shape moving among the boxes, and the air grew cold around him. "Who's there?" Jake called out, his voice trembling. The shape stopped moving and seemed to turn towards him. Jake's flashlight flickered, and for a moment, he thought he saw a pair of hollow eyes staring back at him. The shape moved closer, and Jake felt a chill run down his spine. He backed away, his hand searching for something to defend himself with. But before he could find anything, the shape was upon him. It reached out a bony hand, and Jake felt a sharp pain as it touched his skin. Jake screamed and fell to the floor, his flashlight rolling away. The shape loomed over him, its hollow eyes filled with malice. Jake scrambled to his feet and tried to open the door again, but it wouldn't budge. Desperation gave him strength, and he threw his weight against the door. It finally gave way, and Jake stumbled out into the aisle. He ran, his heart pounding in his chest, the sound of the knocking still echoing in his ears. He burst into the main store, gasping for breath. The lights flickered, and Jake felt a sense of dread wash over him. He knew he had to get out of there, but his legs felt like lead. He forced himself to move, heading for the front entrance. As he reached the doors, they slid open, and a cold breeze swept through the store. Jake stepped outside, the night air chilling him to the bone. He turned back to look at the store, half expecting to see the ghostly figure standing in the doorway. But there was nothing there. Jake knew he couldn't go back inside. He needed help, someone who could understand what was happening. He decided to call Dr. Hargrove, hoping the historian could provide some answers. Dr. Hargrove listened intently as Jake recounted what had happened. The historian's face grew grave as he heard about the shadowy figure and the strange occurrences. "It seems the spirits are not at rest after all," Dr. Hargrove said, his voice filled with concern. "There must be something more, something we missed." Jake felt a sense of dread wash over him. What do we do now? Dr. Hargrove sighed. "We need to find out more about the cemetery and the people who were buried there. There might be something in the town records that can help us." They decided to meet at the library the next day. Jake spent the night at a friend's house, too afraid to return to his own home. He barely slept, his mind racing with thoughts of the shadowy figure. and the horrors that awaited him at Walmart. The next morning, Jake and Dr. Hargrove met at the library. They pored over old town records, searching for any information about the cemetery and the people who were buried there. After hours of searching, they finally found a clue. The cemetery had been the burial ground for a small, isolated community known as the Hollow Grove. The community had been shunned by the rest of the town, accused of practicing dark rituals and witchcraft. The town records mentioned a series of mysterious deaths and disappearances, which were blamed on the Hollow Grove residents. Dr. Hargrove looked up from the records, his face pale. It seems the community was wiped out in a fire. The townspeople believed they were cursed and decided to burn the entire settlement to the ground. The bodies were buried in unmarked graves, and the land was left abandoned. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. So the spirits are angry because they were wronged. Dr. Hargrove nodded. It appears so. They were never given a proper burial, and their spirits are restless. We need to find a way to put them to rest. Dr. Hargrove suggested performing a cleansing ritual to appease the spirits. They gathered the necessary supplies and made their way back to Walmart that night. The store was eerily quiet, the aisles empty and the lights dimmed. They set up the ritual in the parking lot, lighting candles and incense. Dr. Hargrove recited ancient prayers, calling upon the spirits to find peace. Jake felt a sense of unease as the ritual progressed, the air growing colder around them. As the ritual reached its climax, the ground beneath them began to tremble. The candles flickered, and Jake could see the shadowy figures of the Hollow Grove residents appearing around them. Their hollow eyes were filled with sorrow and anger, their ghostly forms shimmering in the night. Dr. Hargrove continued to chant, his voice steady and calm. The figures began to fade, their forms becoming less distinct. Jake felt a sense of relief as the air grew warmer and the ground stopped trembling. Finally, the figures disappeared completely, and the night grew still. Dr. Hargrove finished the ritual, and Jake felt a sense of peace wash over him. The following days at Walmart were uneventful. The strange occurrences had stopped, and the store returned to its normal routine. Jake felt a sense of relief, knowing that the spirits had finally found peace. He continued to work the night shift, but the eerie feeling that had plagued him was gone. He knew that the Hollow Grove residents had been wronged, and he was glad they had been able to help them find rest. Dr. Hargrove continued his research into the town's history, uncovering more about the Hollow Grove community. He and Jake remained in touch, and their friendship grew stronger as they shared their experiences and discoveries. Years later, Jake would look back on those nights at Walmart and remember the true horror stories that had unfolded in the quiet, sterile glow of the fluorescent lights. He knew that the spirits of the Hollow Grove residents had finally found peace, and he was grateful for the experience. The lesson he had learned was clear. Sometimes, the past refuses to stay buried. The spirits of those who were wronged will always seek justice, and it is up to the living to help them find peace. And every time Jake walked through the aisles of Walmart, he would remember the haunting presence of the Hollow Grove and the true horror stories that had unfolded there.